Hello, welcome to Safety Wars for Tuesday, August 25th, 2026. We are not from the border of liberty and prosperity. We are much further north in OSHA Region 1, so you can figure out what that is. So before we start the program, let me remind you, right? This is Safety Wars on Safety FM. We talk about all different kinds of things. Everything is available in popular press, publicly available. We try to stick to that, government publications, and we also talk about what's in the news. Let me say this: everyone is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law, and a lot of the cases we talk about are either dropped, vacated, people are not convicted, companies are, there's no liability in the end and everything else. So we don't know exactly where this stuff is headed to or anything. We're just reporting things that are out there. So let's go on with the show. Some bad news this afternoon. We had Dolly Parton, right, who passed away at 80 years old. Her husband passed away in March, and it's almost like an institution going on there. Hold on. I closed the page here. I am in a park because it's such a nice day out. Why would I not be in a park doing this? Who wants to be in a studio when you can be out here in the park doing this? Hopefully I'm not going to get arrested or something, for loitering. I don't know. We're shooting a news program. Anyway, Dolly Parton is a institution. It's like she's 80 years old, noted career. She had movies, she had TV shows, she had many hit songs. She was a mentor to many people, but those are all very important, very good things. But one of the things that I thought that impressed me the most about her was her dedication to education. She promoted reading. She had a couple of organizations out there, my understanding, that promoted reading, especially to the lower income, disadvantaged folks of all different types of backgrounds. As my favorite Star Trek character, right, of the new Trek series, Jet Reno, played by Tig Notaro. When she was asked how come she knows so much, she used one of my lines. I thought they got it from me. It's a common line. I read. Reading is critical out there. With the entertainment and everything else, it's very important, but I think promoting reading, just reading and education is critical, especially if we're going to remain competitive in this country as well as the rest of the Western world. That's critical. So we're going to head on over to, I did not have this set up right, to feature story news, and we'll go from there.
From Feature Story News in San Francisco, I'm Ira Spitzer. Iran's economy minister says Tehran has been preparing for a long time for the latest round of American sanctions and is ready to face them as the Iranian rial hits a record low. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on Monday unveiled what he called Operation Economic Outcast, targeting nearly 60 entities, individuals, and vessels involved in oil smuggling, nuclear procurement, and cyber operations. FSN's Nick Harper reports from Washington.
In many ways, Scott Bessent's comments were very heavy on threats, very thin on details. Not many specifics in terms of exactly who, where or what would be sanctioned. The Treasury, however, put out a long list after his speech, detailing some of the 60 entities, individuals and companies who are now part of this new sanctions regime. But it is likely to be extended further.
Meanwhile, Pakistan says significant progress has been made in efforts to end the war between the U.S. and Iran after the country's army chief and interior minister held a day of talks in Tehran. The 60-day peace framework set out in the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding, signed in June by Pakistan, Iran, and the U.S., lapsed in mid-August without renewal. FSN's Hira Mustafa reports from Islamabad.
Taking to the social media platform X, the country's Interior Minister Mohsin Naqvi, who was part of the Pakistani delegation and who traveled with the country's Chief of Defense Forces on Monday to Tehran, has stated that significant progress has made with regards to Iran-US talks. He clearly did not outline what sort of progress, but he did talk about that there were discussions with regards to the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, which is a major point of contention between the warring parties. The Pakistani delegation held extensive meetings.
India's national security advisor met China's vice president in Beijing. The discussions came as both sides seek to resolve the standoff that began along their disputed frontier in 2020, with India saying peace along the border is a prerequisite for broader ties, while Beijing has pushed to move the relationship forward. FSN's Neha Punia reports from the Indian capital.
China has been saying for many years now that, one incident shouldn't drag the entire relationship down. But India's position has been that what happened at that border has very much defined this relationship for several years now. And it maintains that to have a relationship that is prosperous, that is one that is built on mutual trust, the border needs to be peaceful and the border needs to go back to pre-2020 levels.
From bureaus worldwide, this is FSN.
With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks, looking in more detail today at the Democratic Socialists of America, the left-wingers who are increasingly coming to prominence after winning several midterm election primary contests in states across the USA. President Trump dismisses them as radical left communists, but DSA leaders like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York believe the movement is on track to exercise more leverage over the Democratic Party, with some DSA figures even saying it needs to supplant existing centrist members of the party's elite. Political historian Anton Yeager with thoughts about where things might be heading.
The question the DSA faces, and you can see this very explicitly in a figure such as AOC, is are they going to remain subject to the demands or the priorities of the Democratic Party, or are they going to become an independent force? If AOC decides to run for president, is she going to do so as a representative of the DSA who happens to run on a Democratic ticket, or is she going to be a fully Democratic with a large D candidate? I think the institutional strength of the DSA will reflect itself in that choice.
He spoke to Foreign Policy magazine. The DSA could be an electoral drag in November's midterms on the Democratic Party, given the focus that right-leaning media is now placing on many of the left-wingers' policy positions. With FSN Spotlight, I'm Simon Marks.
The main news again. Iran's economy minister says Tehran has been preparing for a long time for the latest round of American sanctions. Pakistani officials renew their efforts to bring both the U.S. and Iran back to the negotiating table. And Chinese and Indian officials meet in Beijing as both sides seek to resolve the standoff along their disputed frontier. That is the latest feature story news. Ira Spitzer reporting.
Thank you, Ira Spitzer. There with FSN Radio News, as Jay Allen calls them, the professional broadcasters that we bring in here on the network. Now, here's something else. A little bit of humor here, a little bit of something very important. So I'm not going to mention the name of the drug, but I want you to go look it up. So this came across. No, I don't like to name specific drugs, and that's why we don't do food recalls here. Things of that nature. Call this number. You're off by one number. You're off by one thing, and now all of a sudden there's a problem, sort of thing. So we remember the old wives' tale when we grew up. Doing certain activities cause blindness here. Well, here we have a real life thing here, right? Men taking the erectile dysfunction and the large prostate drug, you can go look it up for what it is, were 33% more likely to develop primary open-angle glaucoma, which causes vision loss. Well, truth is stranger than fiction here on this, an old wives' tale. So go look that up. There with that. I see a couple of people I know running out and very concerned right about now with that. So we're going to do a share screen here, and here we have our Department of Labor. Here, we covered a lot of this stuff last week, but let me cover this this week. So this is from the 20th here, which was a couple of days ago. August 19, the U.S. Department of Labor announced a successful resolution of Rapid Response Labor Mechanism. The United States today announced a successful resolution of the USMCA Rapid Response Labor Mechanism matter at the Grupo Yazaki SADCV facility located in Leon, Guanajuato, Mexico. The United States has resumed liquidation of tariffs on goods from the Yazaki facility, which manufactures automotive components, wire harnesses, and electronic components. The resolution represents real progress in protecting American workers' ability to compete in trade, requiring Mexican manufacturers to comply with Mexican law and the provisions of the USMCA. It is another win for the Trump administration, whose America's First approach puts American workers first by ensuring auto parts suppliers in other countries do not undermine worker protections to gain an unfair trade advantage or attract investment. Actions taken by Yazaki to address the matter include issuing a neutrality statement and company guidelines related to freedom of association and collective bargaining, that's union organizing. Adopting a policy to respect the rights of minority unions that do not hold ownership of the collective bargaining agreement, and signing a letter of commitment to deliver the neutrality statement and company guidelines to workers, train workers on the same, and provide space for Mexico's Secretary of Labor and Social Welfare to train workers on freedom of association and collective bargaining, and publish and disseminate to workers the company's minority union policy. Actions taken by Mexico to address the matter include delivering in-person trainings for all company personnel on freedom of association and collective bargaining, and monitoring the facility and engaging with the workers and the company throughout its review period. It goes on and on and on. You can check that out on the Department of Labor website. And U.S. Department of Labor finds Wisconsin food manufacturer repeatedly exposed workers to safety hazards following 2 incidents and 3 fatalities. This is from Janesville, Wisconsin. The U.S. Department of Labor has cited a Wisconsin-based food products manufacturer after 2 incidents involving industrial kettles, releasing hot steam and liquid, causing 3 workers' deaths and 2 serious injuries. Investigators with the department's OSHA responded to the first incident on February 12, 2026 at IPMF LLC, operating as NaturePack. The incident involved the lid of an industrial kettle unexpectedly opening after a clogged vent line led to a pressure buildup, then releasing steam, liquid, and organic material onto 2 employees nearby. One of the employees was also struck by an object and suffered a concussion. Both employees were hospitalized, and one later passed away because of complications from their injuries. A month later, OSHA investigators responded to another incident involving multiple worker hospitalizations on March 18th when a kettle lid opened while under pressure, releasing steam, hot water, and organic material, burning 3 workers. 2 workers were fatally injured and another hospitalized. OSHA issued the employer 1 serious citation for the design and usage of kettles leading to pressure and thermal burn hazards, a repeat citation for exposing workers to falls to lower levels, and an other than serious citation for failing to notify employees working adjacent to permit required confined spaces. OSHA also issued serious citations for exposing workers to thermal burns without quick access to emergency water. The employer also received citations for exposing workers to falls into the kettles and for failure to assess PPE for thermal risks. In addition, OSHA issued repeat citations for failure to develop, document, and utilize lotto procedures for the kettles and failure to train employees on lockout-tagout procedures. The agency issued citations with $115,000 in penalties related to the inspection of February 12th and another almost $250,000 for penalties for the inspection opened on March 18th. I don't know what to tell you other than, you have OSHA show up. Probably worth it to have somebody like us at 845-269-5772 to help you out on that. You can text message us there. That's the easiest way you can get in contact with us is via text message. With that, 3 fatalities. I don't know what to tell you. Here we have U.S. Department of Labor fines Tennessee restaurant franchisee $62,000 in penalties for employing minors to illegally operate hazardous materials. We covered this a couple of times over the years with the and this was reported on, I believe this is the second time this happened at this facility or one with a similar name here with this. So, depending on what state you're in, and it could be by state DOL, Department of Labor, or whatever the equivalent is, or the federal DOL, in this case it's federal, there are certain things that minors cannot do. So, for example, if you're under 18, in some states you cannot work construction at all. I know that's shocking, right? I came across this a couple of times myself. I said, well, if they're doing like equipment runs or maybe coffee runs and something not specifically construction related, maybe office work in the yard where it's not legally construction or general industry, you might, and again, see your attorney, I'm not giving legal advice here, you might be able to get around some of these laws and get people involved, teenagers involved, minors involved. But the minute that you put them into 1926 work, covered by, construction work, and construction is also defined as decorating and painting and demolition. When you get them involved in that now, depending on where you are, you may not be able to do that with that. So, so what did they do? This was a restaurant. Two Beacons LLC operating in Scranton Deeds was hurt. So a minor was hurt by hot grease while using a manual fryer. Investigators found that the restaurant allowed minor employees to manually lower food into hot oil deep fryers. I tell you what, I did that at Roy Rogers when I was a teen. Right? But this is prohibited for 14 and 15-year-olds. Minors were also permitted to operate a commercial-grade batter mixer, which is prohibited for workers under age 18, violating federal child labor laws under the Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA. The employer also permitted 14 and 15-year-olds to work outside of legally allowed hours. That's a big one there. Franchisee paid $62,235 in civil monetary penalties to resolve the child labor violations and sign an enhanced compliance agreement that affects all 7 of its current and all future locations. Under the agreement, the employer will modify the uniforms of employees under 16 years old. So that's a good administrative control. If you're under 16, you got to wear a different uniform with that. Now, the problem is with administrative controls and setting new rules. What do you think happens? What do you think happens? Stuff is not. You have to communicate the rule. You have to communicate why the rule is in place. You have to communicate why it's in place and what the consequences are, and you actually have to enforce the rule with that. All right, and you got to prove it. Now, so managers are going to be held accountable for child labor regulations, right? Violations, including the possibility of termination. Well, you got to prove that. You can't just say, well, we're going to do, I don't know. You got to prove that. It applies to all OSHA regulations. So if you're going to use the defense employee misconduct, what happens? You have to go and say, okay, employee misconduct, fine. Okay, this is how we enforce the rule. With that, and here's the proof of that. And it was communicated, and the reasons why, and everything else. Because what happens oftentimes in these restaurant situations, especially fast food, which is what this sounds like, or right, I'm assuming that, is that you have a high manager turnover here. And oftentimes, new managers do not get educated by the old managers. Old managers are terminated, and you end up losing that institutional memory here with that. So this is where it would behoove you, if you're making these rules, to have in the notebook, have a file, have a training program, have something that says, look, these are the rules, these are why, these are the critical steps, and this is why you need to do that. With that, so you don't lose the institutional memory. Now you're going to think institutional memory at a restaurant? Yes, institutional memory at a restaurant, because I could easily see a manager leaving here, a new manager coming on trying to prove themselves, or perhaps it's a manager that gets promoted from within, or it gets put into a situation. Well, now yesterday you were operating a fryer, today you're the manager. I mean, I remember when I was in this business, we had, in the restaurant business, they would literally put teenagers in charge of other teenagers. You're asking for a nightmare there, a situation there. Okay. This is out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The U.S. Department of Labor has recovered $101,125 in back wages from 3 Baton Rouge area Japanese restaurants after a federal investigation found federal minimum wage and overtime violations. The department's Wage and Hour Division investigated the pay practices of Gulf Coast Restaurant Group LLC, operating as Umami Japanese Bistro in Baton Rouge, Geishaville LLC, doing business as Geisha and Sushi with a Flair in Prairieville, and Chopsticks, operating as Geisha Sushi with a Flair in Denham Springs. 3 restaurants share the same owners. So if you have the same owner, they treat you as more or less an aggregate. I believe that's the correct term for this. Where, right? It's the same way with a lot of rules out there. For example, Obamacare. It's not what, I have a business here with 10 employees that's exempt, 10 employees here, 10 employees there that's exempt from all this stuff. I'm just saying that. I believe it's 10. Well, then all of a sudden, guess what? You don't have 3 different companies. You have 30. You don't have 10 employees here, and here. You have 30 employees. Now, there's certain rules that are applied. And oftentimes owners think, well, because I have businesses separated, therefore I'm not going to get whacked with certain laws. Now, we all know if you're dealing with, especially in New York State, with Department of Labor rules, they will link businesses together that may have nothing to do with each other, and have different EIN numbers. Right? So I know of 2 companies. One is no longer in existence, where the state government, they were one owner sold the business to another owner who was a family member. 2 different EIN numbers, 2 different things, and they said, well, you're sharing workers and resources. And state of New York could not prove that, did not have a basis for that, with that legally. However, they pursued it and they fought it, and they had to get attorneys and everything else. It was just a complete and total nightmare. And what they ended up doing was formally saying, we are not using each other's resources. And the 2 owners said, we're not using each other's resources, even though they're similar, but they're not the same businesses. And it was just a legal battle that went on for years that they prevailed on eventually. With that. So what happened to these restaurants? So they've said, and again, they violated FLSA standards, Fair Labor Standards Act standards, by saying that everybody's now salaried. So therefore, everyone's salaried, and therefore we don't have to pay overtime. With that, and again, it ran into a lot of money here with this $101,000 plus in back wages and $2,300 in penalties for requiring servers to share tips with kitchen staff here at one restaurant, another one here. I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of dollars here with that. And again, I don't agree with a lot of the Fair Labor Standards Act stuff when it comes to exempt and non-exempt employees, but good luck in trying to reform that law. There were small parts of the law that were reformed by both the Obama administration and then with the Trump administration, where they didn't exactly go after the law. They went after tax on tips with that, and no taxes on overtime. So, they gave a little bit of a remedy, but it doesn't go far enough, because I do know that if you go and you look, and you are a health and safety professional, and you look at what your duties are, so for example, a lot of us are not allowed to make decisions. Well, your job is to make sure the paperwork is done. Your job is to make sure inspections are done. Your job is to write up job safety analysis, or JHA, JSA, whatever you want to call them. And your job is to write reports. So you don't have the authority to hire. You don't have the authority to fire. You don't have the authority to discipline. You don't have the authority to make any changes. Well, at that point, guess what? You're not a salary exempt. You're not an exempt employee, exempt from overtime. They got to pay you overtime because they're not allowing you to manage things. That's my understanding of the law. Again, talk to the Department of Labor yourself. Talk to an attorney yourself about your particular situation. But looking back as an employee, guess what? I did have an argument to be made for salary only. I'm not hourly wage employee collecting time and a half and some of these things. That's why, again, I just started a new project. Again, it's in an email somewhere. I have it in there, what my duties are, and I don't have the authority to hire, fire, or discipline anyone with that. Again, if you're in states like New York, New Mexico, let's remember the Rust with Alec Baldwin, and some of these other states where the state can actually go after you for criminal activity if you don't do your job, if you're a safety professional. Ask Hannah Gutierrez-Reed about this one. She knows about this. They can't go after you. And you end up in jail or fined. So guess what? That's why you got to have that in writing. I don't have the authority. And it's really great when you go up to an agency. Jim, why wasn't this guy thrown off the project? Jim, why we want that guy thrown off the project? And then you say, because I'm a consultant, I say, no, I don't have the authority to hire. I don't have the authority to fire. I don't have the authority to discipline. I don't have the authority to make any changes outside the scope of work of this health and safety program. And then it's like, oh, really? Because this is what happens, especially if you're a consultant. You start telling people they got to be fired, they got to be this, throw them off, run them off the job, this and that nature. Guess what? You're setting yourself up for a lawsuit, potentially. If you are and work as a direct hire, as a regular employee, guess what? If you don't have that in writing, you're going to have a problem eventually, right? So During COVID, we had these issues for people not complying with the COVID guidelines as instituted by the people paying the bill. And and every week I had an email. Have we changed the COVID protocols? The reason why I'm asking this is that I want to make sure we get it in writing and documented that we did not change the protocol. So when it says in the book that I have the authority to throw you off job for violating OSHA protocols, I didn't have to do that. I now can say, well, look, this is what the thing is. This is my contract is. You're violating the rules. It's in my contract that you have to go. No, right? Because if you do it the other way, well, you need to go. You don't have that authority. It's not in writing. Guess who's going to be the fall person? Or the fall guy, right? We'll use the old-fashioned term. It's going to be you. Well, there is a wrongful termination. Well, guess what? Management is going to say, well, what do you mean? I didn't authorize that person to be thing. That was Frank over there. And then guess what? Now it's your fault. It's on you. Why? Because we do know, right? We have a situation here we talked about a couple of weeks ago with the Dr. Fauci situation. There's no accountability. People are making rules up here, and everybody down here has to enforce the rules, and then there's no accountability in there. That's problematic here. I just noticed I'm very green today, right? Green background, say 2 words in green with that. So here's another one. Child labor law day today. And I'm wondering, because the Trump administration has not been doing a lot of press releases since the switch of administration back in January 2025. And here we are approaching the midterms, and we've gotten a slew of press releases from them as to what they're doing. And I've always believed, I know that they were doing what they were supposed to, but I've always believed that you need to promote this. Have your agency justify what they do. So Elon Musk wasn't totally wrong when people say it was totally wrong, but he had the idea that everybody has to list their accomplishments for the previous week. Right? Again, justify what you're doing. These agencies have to come out with more press releases and have to communicate more. Why? So we know what they're doing. So everybody knows where the taxpayers are going, where the tax money is going, what people's jurisdiction are, because we're getting issues out there, especially with departments like the CDC, where you get people like, what the bleep are you doing? You have government bureaucrats coming for the new administration. What the bleep are you doing? Why are you not doing this? This is part of your mission. You're doing too much. You're doing too little. What have you? Again, got to go along with this. So here we have another one. U.S. Department of Labor recovers $618,000 in back wages for 779 workers divide pay full tips by South Carolina restaurant group. And this is $618,666 in back wages to 779 employees, an additional $100,000 in civil monetary penalties after a Department of Labor investigation found child labor and wage violations across 13 restaurant locations. So this is for tropical grill restaurants, they found, violated the hazardous occupation provisions of the FLSA and allowed 14 and 15-year-olds to work longer and later than legally permitted under federal child labor laws. And this was across 13 grill locations, and there was also a tip retention violation. So as part of the agreement, the employer has required to update or create materials that address compliance with child labor laws and provide annual training on child labor regulations for managers and supervisors, among other requirements. So there is a youth rules jobs website here I'm showing here that explains some of this stuff here. And here, let's see, we have some videos here. Let's just play the videos, and hopefully this is going to be recorded.
Hey, did you know workers under 18 cannot perform all jobs? Did you know there are different restrictions for 14 and 15-year-olds if school's in session? Do you ever use a trash compactor, baler, or paper processing machine at work? As a young worker, you have the same rights as other workers, like the right to a safe workplace, job safety training, needed safety equipment, and an ability to speak up without fear. Check out the description below to learn more about the types of jobs and the number of hours you can work.
Now, if I could point out here, the employer has an obligation to give you a safe workplace with that. Not a civil right. It's an obligation with that. It's a distinction there with that, a pretty important distinction. However, all those other things the young lady mentioned, yes, those are rights. You have a right to report violations. You have a right to get things resolved. You have a right to whistleblower protection.
Want a job? If you're under 18, you can work in amusement parks, restaurants, safe construction zones, retail stores, and in agricultural fields. You can even work as a babysitter or an actor as long as you're not using hazardous equipment. Visit youthrules.gov to learn more about the times you can work.
So those are, like, I'll point that out again, those are federal rules. State rules may be different with that, and you need to check out what jurisdiction you are in.
Want a job while you're in school? If you're under the age of 16, you can work after 7 a.m. before 7 p.m., a max of 3 hours per day and 18 hours per week. The rules are a little different while on school break. Visit youthrules.gov to learn more.
And our last one here.
Have you ever had concerns about your pay or wondered how to file a complaint against your employer? We can help. Our services are free and confidential. 2 helpful tips. Know your employer's name and keep a record of the hours you work and your pay. Check out the description below to learn more.
So let's check out those descriptions below. 7 best practices for employers. Right, so this is all good. Train management, distribute resources, build trust, provide different name tags. Right, so this is, again, we talked about just now about our one group about different uniforms, right, to be identified as that. I mean, this is identified as under 16 or 16 or 18 or whatever. Again, this is done in a lot of industries. And the refining industry, they often call it a red star or a gold star with that, where you identify people who are who may be at higher risk for accidents and injuries, and you send them up with a mentor, of course. Train management, I mentioned that. Distribute resources. Again, provide child labor publications all current and new workers under the age of 18. Again, they have a young workers toolkit. If you are a parent or a concerned adult, do this to the younger folks in your that you deal with here with that. And the other thing is this: why aren't our schools doing this? Build trust. Establish an internal phone number that allows workers to report child labor violations anonymously. Name tags were already mentioned. Post warnings about child labor hours limitations. That's all on usually your OSHA poster or on your Department of Labor poster that are in the public areas of your project or your workplace. Use signage on equipment that 14 and 15-year-olds are prohibited to use, and spotlight hazard. Post a stop sticker on equipment that Department of Labor considers hazardous for use by minors. Again, there you go. There's right. Stop. Must be 16 or older to operate this equipment. Right, here we have a whole bunch here. Post warnings. Right, here we have a fact sheet, and it is downloadable here. rather extensive here. Again, your state DOL may have different things. And again, build trust, right? Let workers know they're not going to be retaliated against. That is your Federal Whistleblower Act protections that OSHA manages for most of the federal government there. With that, so something to do. Now, where are we? How many minutes are we past the hour? Okay, we're at 40 minutes past the hour. So our youth rules and our short guides, and you can order publications. We are, right, that's our publications list for youth, right? And child labor fact sheets. Extensive. Now, here's something here. The employment of workers with disabilities at sub-minimum wages. This is from 2008, but it still applies here with that. And again, you're allowed to pay people sub-minimum wages if they are have certain disabilities. How do you like that? With that, labor laws and farm jobs, healthcare industry and youth employment, all this very helpful stuff. And jobs that are off limits. So we're always familiar with the meat processing and slicing. Those are the common ones out there. Power-driven saws. Right? Again, under 18 cannot do. Roofing. Cannot do roofing. Driving. Kids under 18 generally cannot drive motor vehicles or work outside the vehicle as a driver's helper to assist with tasks such as loading, unloading, and securing cargo. Power-driven woodworking. What we called those were lumpers back in the day. They still be called lumpers. But a lumper used to be somebody who was a driver's helper. Power-driven woodworking machinery. Compactors or balers. Explosives. Forklifts and skid steers. Demolition. Mining. Kids under 18 cannot do mining. Logging, forestry, sawmill working, power-driven bakery machines, radioactive material, brick and tile, trenching and excavation, right? Working with metal. So what does that really leave them to do? I don't know. With that, start up their own business? I don't know, that might not be a bad idea. With that, depending on how you set up your own business, I would check an attorney on that one first. Check with an attorney. Let's head on over to the EPA and see what's going on over there. "500 environmental accomplishments by the Trump administration." We went over that already. Rather extensive. A lot of them are what you're supposed to be doing anyway as the EPA. All right. New guidance to reduce lead in drinking water. This is from earlier this week. Late last week, I'm sorry. This is from August 21st. Today, the U.S. EPA released a guidance to help drinking water systems that are working. I'm sorry, let me share that. To keep their communities safe from lead. This guidance advances the agency's commitment to clear and plain language communication while sharing info, definitions, and help water system comply with lead pipe replacement requirements of the lead and copper rule, reducing exposure to lead, a powerful neurotoxin that is especially dangerous to children. And it goes on here. There is no safe level of lead in drinking water. Lead pipes, when present, are the primary source of lead drinking water, and drinking water EPA is committed to using this. Now, one thing that I'm going to suggest here, removal of sovereign immunity protections for regulators and the people who are responsible for doing this for not doing their job. They're not doing their job? Remove sovereign immunity protections. Real simple. with that. I know that's controversial. However, this keeps coming up where people not doing their jobs and not being held accountable for that. With that. Again, this is one of the ways I'm more radical than most environmentalists with this. EPA, in consultation with the Department of Energy, expands gasoline supply to lower prices. The EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin, in consultation with the DOE and in accordance with the Clean Air Act, issued a temporary emergency fuel waiver that will increase the nation's gasoline supply beginning on September 1st, right before the midterms. EPA waivers will allow the sale of E10 gasoline blended with 10% ethanol at a higher Reid vapor pressure. This action will increase the domestic gasoline supply by hundreds of thousands of barrels per day by effectively ending the summer blend gasoline requirement early. With the increase of domestic gasoline supply on the market, Americans can expect to see reduced gas prices with that. And what I'm going to do here is, let me post this in social media with this. Hold on. So if you are my friend on Facebook, Jim Posel, you're going to be seeing this, so we will be putting it on our other social media also. I know it's rude for me to be doing that during the program, but we are, how many minutes into the program? 46 minutes. Okay. Today's action is another example of EPA to conduct PCB sampling in Clark Fork, Bitterroot, and Blackfoot rivers. And this is over at Region 8 over in Denver. Again, I am a little bit familiar here. I've worked a little bit out there with this. So they're doing things with PCBs across the watershed. These persistent chemicals are widely used in industrial applications until production was banned in 1979. They can cause a variety of health concerns in humans and do not easily break down in the environment. There's again, you got that chlorine molecule. Nothing really happens to it. It stays where it is. Over time, they can build up in plants and animals, having an increasing impact through the food chain. The Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes have issued PCB-related fish consumption advisories for all waterways expected to be sampled in this project. With that, again, this is a common thing for. This is a common thing. So, EPA announces 11 major cleanup wins at Superfund sites. EPA deletes all or part of 8 contaminated sites from the national priorities list. Let's see what this is. EPA is deleting the following sites. Again, apparently they hit milestones or they're fully cleaned up or something with this. So here we go. Caldwell Lace Leather Company in Auburn, Kentucky, Diamond Shamrock. And Cedartown, I have worked on a couple of their projects, Diamond Shamrock. Karen McGee in Illinois, DuPage, Illinois. I've worked with Karen McGee way back in the day. Miami Drum Services, Pepper Steel Alloys, and both of those in Florida. Rowe Industries Groundwater Contamination in Sag Harbor, New York. That's out on Long Island. Here we have one in Nebraska, Hastings Groundwater Contamination, Valsicol Chemical Corporation in Illinois. And Marshall, Illinois, and EPA is proposing to delete part of the following sites: Fort Riley in Kansas, Tippecanoe Sanitary Relief Landfill in Lafayette, Indiana, and U.S. Smelter and Lead Refining in East Chicago, Indiana. So, in May 2026, that was recent, as part of its commitment to accelerating and completing Superfund cleanup work, the Trump EPA launched the Superfund Solutions Initiative. This forward-looking effort renews focus on EPA's core mission of protecting human health and the environment while getting more sites to the finish line faster. Throughout the initiative, the agency is employing gold standard science, streamlining decision-making, cutting red tape, and making swifter cleanup decisions modernizing tools and increasing cooperative federalism deliver communities across the country. I know on some of the projects from some of the colleagues I've spoken to, the EPA seems to be doing this not only on the ones who are almost cleaned up, these sites, but the ones who are recently cleaned up, but on the current ones in the pipeline, so to speak. Where that's what I'm hearing around the industry. If you heard something different, let me know. Be glad to hear other people's input on this. And that's what we have here for tonight. I think we're going to stop there. A lot of EPA news. We haven't really been going over it with this, but it's so what we're going to talk about tomorrow is the OSS guide on simple sabotage and what people inadvertently do or deliberately do to sabotage companies and possibly your safety program. And for Safety Wars, this is Jim Polzel. We're cutting it off a little bit early tonight. We're probably going to insert some music at the end of this, and I hope to see you tomorrow.